Hey guys, welcome back. I'm just catching up for Nodevember right now, so I'm on the 15th, days behind. I'm starting early today, so maybe I can catch up later. And yeah, we're going to be working on making a futuristic city. This is inspiration from Batman Beyond. Here's from the new game, Steampunk. Wait, not Steampunk, Cyberpunk 2077. And yeah, so I'm going to take a color from this and the shapes from this. Just do our best to, work with that inspiration. We're going to start with a plane. And, yeah, I'm doing this because the prompt today for Nodevember is Cyberpunk. Yeah, so just put this here. Got a rendered view. And let's add some geometry to this because we're going to use that to displace it. So yeah, so use a subdivision surface, change it to simple, turn it up to like 6. We're not really going to be working with render until the end. And then so if we go change it to cycles, we can change the material settings as well. So first we need to create a material. Minimize this, go to settings, displacement only. Of course, we're not getting any displacement because we need to modify our material. So I'm just going to bring the material editor out. So right here. Right now we don't care so much about the shader. So one thing we could start experimenting with to create some random buildings is a Voronite texture. We can use this to create sort of a randomness. I think we want it to be pretty much on a grid, though. Keep it pretty straight. Put that into here. Yeah, so here we can see how it's affecting position, so that's pretty interesting. This is 0, 0, and this is 1, 1, so this is 1, 1, so we can kind of see how it steps over when we plug in the position. It's kind of interesting. But yeah, make sure that it's plugged into height as well. And if we could add to this to create some randomness with color, just like that. We're really starting to get like a terrain with varied degrees right here. And I think this will be a good density for what we're working with. Maybe we could increase it, say like 10. And notice the corners are a bit sharper. I want it to be a nice grid, so to do that, we're going to add, we're using UV coordinates from this plane. I mean, right now they're generated, so they look different, but that's because it was taking into account elevation, but because it's a plane, it only takes the coordinates from when the plane was originally at 0, 0. Like if we look at these coordinates, the color right here is pretty much the same as down there. Yeah, so it doesn't matter if we use generator or UV. They're pretty similar right here. In both cases, this is 0, 0, and this is 1, 1. Generate maps to the bounding box, while UVs just map it to the space that you've established. And UVs are, if we go into edit mode, we can see that the UVs are edited, so it's a box around right there. Also, make sure in your preferences that you've activated the Node Wrangler add-on. So under add-ons right here, and make sure this is checked. Yeah, so I want some fallout. I want some separation, some streets to exist in between. Yeah, well, okay, but first let's center this better so we can see the lines better from top view. So we see this border. So what we can do is I'm going to change this to 1, and I'm going to do all the transformations over here. So it's become scale. So we can use this to change the scale and subtract by 0.5 here, and then we can add by 0.5 here. This is just to shift it in place to change what the center is. And if we stick to an even number, we'll get an even whole number, we'll get a nice continuation there. And yeah, so there's that. It's kind of cool. We can decrease that with multiplier. So we plug this into here. Yeah, and right here, when you have a grid, the geometry, it's limited by the geometry. So you'll see as it gets sharper and sharper, it'll get closer to a square. It just kind of has to decide which pixels based on what it sits. So, like if there's a pixel here, there's a very sharp line in deciding if it goes up or down. We can taper that off if we use distance, but this is spherical, so if we multiply this right here, well, let's change this to add, so it's shifting up from that point. Yeah. Yeah, so if I plug in distance right here, dark part is going to go in, so we need to flip that, actually. Yeah, so we can see all of that. And of course, as I mentioned before, these are all spherical, so let's we have to use another Voronoi called distance, but we have to use but because this doesn't have the color and position outputs that we're using, we're going to have to that's why we have to make another copy. And if you look at this, it's the right scale, so it all lines up anyway, so that's okay. And so right now it's going inwards, so in this case, just adjust this, flip it around, and yeah, so now we can see this. And as you can see here, there's lots of variation in slope, and there's buildings on top of, like there's a lot of these smaller parts on top, and some sloped tops. So to do that, we kind of want some of them to be sloped. We can mask it out with the random node. So either they're going to be sloped or they're not. I think they're mostly a similar slope. Well, there's quite some variation in the amount of sloping. So here, let's just spread this out a little bit so it's easy to read. What we're going to do for slope is we're going to add a gradient texture. And it's linear, so when it's plugged into UV, we can rotate it. I think I'd actually like to make it repeating. So if we use a math node and set to Modulo, we're getting that repetition. It will just separate X, Y, Z. Okay, let's put the modulo over here. Change that to modulo. So we have gradient going across, and oh, this should be modulo, not multiply. Okay. Okay, so I guess I need to put this here. Yeah, we put it after. Yeah. We could have this drive the scale so it always lines up if we were to adjust it. So we can use this value node, plug it into there. So that gives us 12. And if we put it into here, change this to divide, divide by 1, we get, is that enough? Yeah, so we need to plug this in right here. Let's test this out. So if needs to be to line it up with this Voronoi texture. Yeah, so now it's lined up. Yeah, so it was right. So 1 divided by that value, we'll get this. And then it's hard to see here, but we are adding a slope to all of the buildings. Yeah, which is kind of cool. But yeah, we want it to be on just some of them. And again, to do that, we're going to use this greater than to mask it out. And actually, if we want, we could use a color ramp instead of greater than, so if we don't want a very sharp change. So if I just plug that into the factor here, this is like random values, all these colors, that's how we got those. We can just plug that in there. So now we see some of them are sloped and some aren't. Try to increase the difference here if we multiply. Actually, let's multiply this down here. This is currently at, so let's fix that. So that's a bit much. Yeah, maybe we could also multiply it by the position. So if this is 0, 0, then if we multiply it by this area will flatten out more. And let's randomize this rotation as well. So if I again use the Voronoi texture and plug it into here, even though this is behind this, this isn't affecting this Voronoi texture, so I can go ahead and affect it with this. So now we have a random rotation on the slope. I think I'd like that to be either just stick to 90-degree values, and let's make sure this is z-axis, so spinning around this blue axis right here on the top. It's kind of hard to tell the direction of things, so maybe I can look at the normal output. We can see, so these ones are all facing the same direction. And yeah, so normals displays like what the direction things are facing. And again, we're getting some things going in instead of up over there. To debug and figure out why that is. It seems like it's most likely this. Must be getting some negative values somewhere. Yeah, so if I clamp this, we can see that's making the difference. So maybe I can just add node here. It shifts the stuff up to the positive side. And let's just clamp this so we don't get any negative values. And yeah, so let's get back to randomizing this rotation. Right now these are mostly equal, the amount that we're adding here. So this should give us more variation. So let's bring that up. And yeah, let's leave some room for the streets. So right here we're not getting consistent street level thing. And so with that, this is the one that's taking from the edge. It controls the edge of each of these buildings. So I'm actually going to plug this into this first, and this after, so that it affects all of this. And then make sure this goes in the height instead of that. Yeah. And then let's bring this down. And for now this yeah. So this should be randomizing the rotation when it's plugged into here. If I use another gradient texture but then separate it by constant values, we'll know that we're getting different very precise changes. So 1 to 0, and then let's say this is 1, this is 360, then we have 90, which will be 0.25 across, and then this will be 0.75. And again, so we're going to make this constant values. So there's nothing in between what these are. And right here, between 0 and 1 isn't very much, I think, for rotation. And let's just unplug this to see what the difference is. Yeah, so this is in degrees, so we should get, if we multiply this by 360, we can probably convert those into degrees. So right now these are values between 0 and 1. Yeah. So we're getting, yeah, so if we look at the normal now, it's normal output, okay, which is what we already had. It's yeah, so that looks good to me. And let's, we could layer on more Voronoi right here as well. I'm going to use this color ramp, maybe add a street level. Yeah, so we can mess with the slope of each of these right here. Yeah, so if we take a principled shader, we'll start adding the materials of these buildings. And let's make it look cool like this. So I might take inspiration from the lines work here. If I take a wave texture, and always making a multiple of pi, it gives you nice round edges in the tiling. So if we sample this, notice this is a repeating texture if we make it like that. So Z axis, and then we're actually, because the CUVs don't have a Z axis, we're going to need to use another texture coordinate. Generated, remember, also won't work because it's based on before the plane is displaced, so there's a very flat Z-axis, so it doesn't really exist. Planes don't have any thickness. So I'm just going to use this geometry node, plug into position, and yeah, there we have those streaks that we can work with. And yeah, to make it more random, I'm going to actually use a Voronoi texture. So change of pace there. And I'm going to separate everything except for the Z-axis, which gives us a wave texture, but we can control this randomness now. We kind of get something like that. And we can also, let's see, if the geometry node, the pointiness, do we get results for that with this? No. So I guess that only exists after it's been displaced. I mean, maybe we can try turning it up. Maybe I could be wrong. Nope. Yeah, so that doesn't work. But we can use the fall off from this one. So just shift right click right there. I guess I should have turned on my screencast keys right there so you can see what I'm doing. Yeah, shift A to add, and then control shift click to sample things. It's pretty much the main things I've been doing. Yeah, and so if I plug this into here, we'll get, well, yeah, so we have this texture, let's multiply it. by this. Should get like something darker around the edge. Let's try to figure out why I'm getting something here, or not here. Okay, let's just use this node right here. So again, shift right click, and then you can dissolve this one with Control X, and just plug that in there. Maybe it was above 1, the value's there, but there was some gray, so it didn't seem like it. Anyway, with this multiplied, we get something right here. But yeah, I think we need maybe to clamp the results there so we don't have negative values. And yeah, maybe I'll just use this root so we have this control. Yeah, and then we can, so now we're getting something. We can adjust that. And then use a greater than node so we get sharper values. And yeah, let's add some color to this. So we're going to use this variation right here, reference this. So I'm seeing mainly the red, yellow, blue, and green are what stand out to me here. So let's just make another one of these color ramps. And so green, red, yeah, it's very saturated, right? And then finally the yellow, which is just slightly orangish, I think I want. And here we're getting stuff in between, so we want to change that constant. And the red isn't getting anything because of how constant is set up. And we can make this red a little bit more orange. And we can plug this into the emission texture. So now that we have this, well, let's also multiply this by here. Yeah, make sure this is all the way up to 1. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. And then let's make these buildings just like a dark gray. Yeah. I guess the one thing is all these rings look pretty much the same. Like they're at the same height. If I were to like go from a side view, right, it's pretty repetitive. So let's work to create some more variation with that. With the Z position, I think we can just add from this random Bernoulli thing. So yeah, just plug this into here. Yeah, now we should be getting some variation. Yeah, and this is pretty subtle, or maybe it, yeah, when it's all straight lines. So yeah, I think that's pretty random. If you want, you can add a multiplier right here. This is essentially what the math node is missing from a color mix node. And yeah, and we could, if you want, we can also have some, this time I'm just going to use a wave texture going from vertically, so this, I think we'll need both an X and a Y going over. This, yeah. But we don't need to separate the X, Y, Z because that's what it kind of does by choosing an axis. So, if we, yeah, so now we see we have this running down this side, this one running the other side. These are both set to Y, so change that to X. And let's try pi times 3. Try that without caps lock, pi times 3. Yeah, pi times 3. And yeah, so we're going to multiply these by each other, combine them. So we're getting that, and then we're going to multiply these. So if I plug that into here, and make sure this is sampled, so now we can see we're getting this result. So we have some nice windows. Some of these I do want to have like vertical, let's have some randomness in there. So to do that, I'm going to use that Voronoi random color right here. So, that we use to drive this. So I guess I could just use multiply like this, and then from this is a gradient right here, so we're going to need to change that to a sharp value using greater than. And yeah, so for some of these actually we want we don't want it to become totally black. We want to get rid of those vertical lines. So with screen, it'll become white, so it won't affect that area. See, this affects the amount of vertical lines. And yeah, so we have that there. Oh, and because we're using the same seed for this Voronoi, we're getting similar color results. We could fix that with if we use a modulo. So I just want to make the color and the what we use on the wave texture different. So if I use multiply to change the seed, and then modulo, and then set this to 1, make sure that's modulo. So like that. This is plugging the greater than there, and we see what this is doing. We're going to have the same amount, but it's just changing the seed right there. And yeah, so then you have randomness, and this is more independent of the randomness of the color. Yeah, let's maybe make we want this gradient to be a sharp line, so yeah, again, we're going to use greater than for that. And yeah, so there you go with this futuristic city. I think I'm going to call it for this. I hope you guys learned some stuff about randomness and just using Voronoi and yeah, displacement. So thanks for watching. Please